My name is Jim Lawrence. I'm not affectionately known as the Swan Lady man, but I'm called that. So how long have you been feeding, or when did you start feeding these birds? And I say, well, it really wasn't my project. It was my wife. She's affectionately known by many people as the Swan Lady. And she started this 34 years ago in 1986. And she fed them for 25 years. And then she got sick, and she knew that she wasn't going to be feeding them any longer. And so she asked me if I'd feed the birds. So the purpose of this video is for me to talk about a promise that I made to a lady. Oftentimes, every winter when I'm out here getting ready to feed the swans, I'll make a run down there and lay, say, 10, 12 bales out there. I feed like I throw grass seed out. And I'll throw those out, and then birds will come in, and the aggressive ones will come in right away, and they'll start eating. And I come up to what I call the rail. And the people are up there, and so now I'm going to talk to them, because the birds are, now they feel safer. I'm not down there. They pretend that they're afraid, but they're really not afraid. This is 34 years, you know what I'm saying? So they understand what the game is. But so the situation is, I'll watch them eat and monitor what they're doing and how they're feeding and leaving and whatever. In the meantime, I can talk to the people that are up there and answer the questions that they have. What we need is to get some history behind the feeding of the trumpeter swans and why and whatever. In the 1700s, there were hundreds of thousands of trumpeter swans in the United States. And by 1800s, there was just a few left. By 1930, there were 60 birds sitting out in Red Rock Reserve, National Refuge now. And that's all there were in the whole United States. And so a lot of people were concerned that they were going to be extinct. In fact, for all general purposes, they were extinct. And so some people got the idea that they thought that they wanted to try to restore them. A lot of animals that we've done that in the United States. We've done the loons and the peregrine falcons and you name it. The bluebirds. We've done all kinds of things to put programs together to try to restore them, and in the eagles. And so it's one of those things we've been very successful on it. So they knew that the only inventory, if you will, of swans was out in Red Rock, and they didn't have very many birds. But like I said, in 1939 they had 69 birds left. Well, in the 60s, some Minnesota people decided they wanted to be a part of trying to restore the trumpeter swan. So they made arrangements with Red Rock out there to get some birds from them. And so they got birds, and they hatched eggs, and they put them in various places in Minnesota and hoped that it would, that things would happen. If you hatch the eggs and they can find a mate someplace down the road, and well, bottom line, they did that for 20 years. And there still wasn't any number of birds. Now, they had a lot of little projects. Carl Savory, there was a lot of projects all over the state, but it didn't work. So it was working, but it's all you got. So you got to keep doing what you've been doing until you figure out a different way or a better way. So then they were getting eggs and all kinds of stuff, and they kept doing it. And the people who were really into it were some people in Hennepin Park, 20 miles away from here, over there. So it was. They had Lake Rebecca. They were into doing this. They got the birds and from Red Rock, and so they made the boilerplate for how it's going to get the birds, hatch the eggs, and all those kinds of things. And they were doing the best they could, but it wasn't really working. Nobody still ever saw any. So about 1977, a guy by the name of Carol Henderson became head of non-game wildlife with the Minnesota DNR, and he was a bird guy. And he went all over the world, doing, looking at birds and taking pictures and whatever. But and he was an Iowa guy, and but he was heavy into knowing that he thought he could do something about helping restore the trumpeter swan. Now, when you say restore to me and everybody else means you got to have at least 2 gene pools. We only had one gene pool. We had Red Rock Reserve out there, and all the birds that were coming here. I doubt that that was the reason that things weren't going, but you need to have another gene pool if you're going to pull this thing off. So Carroll got permission. He knew there was swans up there in Alaska. He got permission to go up there and get some eggs, steal eggs, pilfer eggs, I call it. But so he had a friend who was also a bird guy, built bluebird houses, Dave Algren, and he was a pilot for Northwest. So and he was in with the president, and he said, "Hey, what's the chances of me cut me loose and let me fly Carroll up there and steal some eggs?" And the president says, "Yeah, I guess that'd be fine." So they did, got up there, got a float plane, went out and stole 50 eggs, brought them back to, and Steve Kittleson, I think, was with them, and they were turning the eggs over and doing all the things you have to do to get them back here safely. But the boilerplate was back here. Donna Compton with Hennepin Parks have been doing this for 20 years, or for a long period of time. So they just followed the sheet that she had written, and so they did it. So they did 50 eggs the first year. Out of that first 50 eggs, Carroll said, "You know what? Nobody ever sees these things. We should put a couple of them in the zoo." So they put a couple in the Minnesota Zoo. Now those two birds that were put in the zoo, number 7, nobody knew it, but she happened to be a boss cow. She was an alpha female, we'll call it. And nobody knew it. Didn't find that out till later, but she made the rules. Most alphas are not afraid of much. So she got in the zoo. It didn't bother her. She wasn't afraid of anything. For which there was nobody to boss around, because he says, "I'm not doing this no more. Whatever you're telling me to do, it's too small, confinement error. I'm not going to do this." But what she did notice, somebody came to feed her every day. Bosses are always keeping track of something. So the bottom line says, they came to feed her every day. She became imprinted on people. Now, this is my story. This is not a biologist story, but this is what I saw now over the 34 years here of watching these trumpeter swans when Sheila was feeding, and when I fed for the last 8. And so the bottom line says Sheila was feeding right down in this corner down here, ducks and geese one day, and Carroll had determined at some point we should let 7 and 8 loose and put 2 new ones in here. So they did, and they don't know she's in front of people. They don't know she's an alpha female. So she's flying down the river because the Mississippi is it's their route to the Gulf gets them down there, and so she's flying down the river. Now again, my story, but you can put the stuff together. Sheila's down here feeding. She looks down there and she sees that Sheila's feeding, and she banks and she turns. And if you've ever seen these swans come in and land, or the geese, they'll bank just like fighter jets. Put the skis down and they coming right in. She landed out about 20 feet in front of Sheila. She started walking right in. The rest followed her in. She walked up to Sheila and she says, "I'm 7, he's 8, and these 3 unmarked are with me, and you're a feeder. Give me my food." And she clicked her beak like this, and she says, "Give me my food." And Sheila, she was as big as Sheila, and Sheila said, "I didn't know whether she wanted to bite me or she wanted some food." So she had some corn, so she threw some corn down there. Now she immediately started to eat, and she started getting what I call happy butt. Life is good for this period of time until it changes. Right now, this is the best I've had it all day. Well, the bottom line says she was eating the food and making little sounds, cute little sounds. I said, well, I was over in Sherburne Refuge doing some work for the feds over there, and I came home. She says, "You cannot believe the size of the big geese I got down here today." And I said, I looked out there and I said, "Honey, I'm from North Dakota. You remember that?" And I said, "I shot every duck and goose that there is, and these are some kind of swan." She said, "No, they're not swans." She said, "Swans got a curvy neck." And I said, "Well, there's one. Mute does. I knew that." And I said, "But there's more swans than that. There's different kinds, but I don't know anything about them either." I knew that there was one that you could hunt, the tundras you could hunt, and there were a bunch of them, and we never did them. We didn't have them in North Dakota. So she's not buying it. She thinks they're geese. So I said, "Well, they got name tags on them." I said, "Why don't you call DNR tomorrow and ask them about your big geese? Tell them the numbers that's on their neck and ask them about your big geese." So she said, "I will." So she did that, and so the next day she called, and I was listening downstairs. She was talking on the phone, and she says, "I'm Sheila Lawrence, and I feed trumpeter swan. I feed ducks and geese on the river, and I've got some of your big geese here, and here's our numbers." Well, it was quiet, and then they said, No, ma'am, you got endangered trumpeter swans. We'll send somebody right out. Well, it was probably Lori that she was talking to, and the bottom line says Carol came out within the day. And he looked and says, yep. He says, that's 7, and that's 8. I put him in the zoo, and I released him. And so Sheila says, well, can I feed him? And he says, well, really, we don't normally like people to feed endangered species. We just don't. But down deep, they were trying to restore those things, and what they really wanted was somebody that could keep track of them. Well, if you're going to feed them and they're going to stay there and feed, it's a good thing. And he says, well, I think you could feed them as long as they don't become tame or get in trouble walking in people's garages. Swans, when they are afraid of something, their eyes get real big. A lot of animals do, but swans' eyes, you can really tell, they get huge. And she said they were really close. They were like 5 feet away, and they knew they shouldn't be there, and they didn't know what was going on. But number 7, she was eating the corn and everything's cool. All of a sudden, number 7 turned around, and she looked at him. She says, I was close. She didn't say a thing to him, and then she turned around again. She started eating. They all started eating. I said, boss cow. That's a North Dakota, I just knew for sure in my own mind that probably was the situation. She was a boss cow. So bottom line says they were all eating. So the rest of the week they stayed here and they ate, and she went down and fed them every day at 10:30. She started the 10:30 feeding, and within a week, 10 days at the most, 10 more birds flew by. And they said, they did the trumpeter swan handshake up there. Are you trumpeter swan? Yes, we are. And so they came right down. And so because she had said the magic, yes, we're trumpeter swans. They sound like a trumpeter, and versus a honk or a quack like a duck. They came on down. So they looked around, landed in the water, said, what's going on here? 7 says, the nice lady comes out to feed every day at 10:30, and we're going to stay all winter. Get in line, just like military. And the next day, when she went out there, those 10 birds were there. In addition, they weren't afraid of her. Now, these are wild birds. They haven't been fed by anybody. Now, 2 of them have bands on them, but the bottom line says they wouldn't normally come in there. But 7 of those were, I call them subadults. They weren't cygnets, but they weren't breeders. So they're all standing there, and 7 had told them, yeah, a nice lady comes up to feed, and so she was feeding 15 birds. Now she really thought she was in heaven, and life was good. And so I'm just looking, saying, really, but in the back of my mind, I keep thinking, boss cow. I wonder what's going on with this boss cow. Why did they come in? But a lot of times they come in just because others of their species are there, and so they decoy to their own species. And so anyway, this goes on, and she feeds them all winter, and nothing bad, and they don't. She walks around out there, and they're not afraid of her and all that. Why? Because 7 said she's a good thing. She's a swan, or she's one of us, or whatever. So the bottom line says this went all winter, and come March, April, they left, and they went to the snow started melting in the fields, and they go to the fields prior to going to a nest site. Well, these didn't have a nest site, that they knew of. But people say, well, where do they go nest? Well, they go nest wherever they find something that they like, and the closer it is, the better. So I say, if you put a shooting target up there, Monticello was a bullseye, and then the first ring around that was another ring and another ring and another ring. Well, in the first few years, there weren't a lot of birds around. You could nest wherever you wanted, right around Monticello. So they did. And number 7 was over in Sherburne Refuge, and so I saw her over there because I was working over there, and I saw her. And the bottom line says I stopped my truck, and she started swimming close to me. She had 7 cygnets, and the cygnets were in the middle, and the male on the other end, and she's swimming close, and I'm looking at binoculars, and I can see what it is. I get up and pick up, and I took off, and I got away from her because I didn't want her swimming up to anybody else and thinking that she's supposed to be fed. And so I got home, and I said, hon, you never believe who I saw today. And she said, I don't know. And I said, I saw 7, and I think it was 28 over in the refuge. And she had 7 cygnets. She says, nope, they don't have 7 cygnets. They only have such and such. I said, well, I saw 7. And she said, no, she thought I was killing her. I said, no, ain't no way. And so I let it be, because I know she's going to be coming here. It's going to get cold, and they're going to be coming. So about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks outside, I came home one day. She says, guess what? I said, 7 and 8. or 28 showed up with 7 signals. He says, how'd you know? I said, it's freezing up and they got to come. So now they came back and they had 7 cygnets. And so the other ones came back. So she had now 25 birds total. So now what started just a couple of years before, she had now 25 birds. 25 years later, the numbers kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but it's still a slow process until you build the numbers. But the good thing was the numbers were able to multiply because they didn't migrate. If they didn't have migratory DNA. So all they knew is they go nest and they come back here to the river in the winter. Sheila feeds them all winter, and there's a weed line about 150 yards out there. And normally the swans are eating aquatic weeds and stuff like that under the water. They got long necks, and that weed line out about 150 yards, they know it's there. They can see it, and so they're out there. And the diver ducks are out there eating out there too. And so the bottom line says, they had the best of all worlds. They got a lady who's going to feed me if I want. If I don't want to eat the corn today, then I'll eat the weeds out today, or I'll eat the weeds in the morning and I'll eat the corn when she comes out. So everything's working for them. And so it's the best of all worlds. We got a power plant that keeps the water open all year round here, and a lady's going to feed you, and this is a shallow side, and there's no current. They're going to loaf on this side, so life was really kind of good. So we had a bunch of stuff that nobody else had, but just luckily we happened to have it. Now the ducks and geese figured it out before they figured it out, because that's why they were here. And so this goes on and for many years, and the numbers, Donna Compton used to come over here, and her and Sheila would sit and drink coffee, look out the window at the swans, and I heard them one day coming up the basement, and I heard them, wouldn't it be great if we could see 100 birds out here? Yeah, it would be something special, wouldn't it? So didn't think nothing of it. Well, after 10 years of doing this, now they got 200 birds sitting out here, and now Sheila could walk around in them all day long. They could care less. They weren't afraid of her. Oh, that only happens if somebody blessed her as being, if number 7 said, hey, she's good. It's not a problem. She's one of us. So everybody who came in right away from the get-go, she was not a problem. She was a swan to them. Now, nobody else was a swan to them, but she was. She could change her hat. And now for a day or so, they were looking, staying away a little bit. And she put back the other hat on. Okay, it's her again, whatever. Now they'd have figured it out, but again, she would try little tricks on them to see what they would do. So this goes on for 25 years now, and the numbers kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we did not have migratory DNA in there yet, and the DNR wanted to migrate now. The 8,000 birds that I just referenced, and us having 2,700 of them. The reason there were now 8,000 birds after 25 years, the swans had everything they needed here. They had the food, they had their choice of foods, and they had a loafing area, and they had what I call the pickup bar. They did not migrate, so all the birds came here. So the old word was that they breed for life. Well, they breed for a reproductive life. But the pickup bar was a significant thing, because if you lost a mate, you could automatically pick one up here. They don't breed till 2, 3, or 4, and when it was their time to breed, and the light went on for them, it was all here, just pick the one. So from about Valentine's Day on, this place goes crazy. It's kind of like all-star wrestling, and so the old male is looking, trying to protect his turf, and his female will say, Harold, he looked at me again, and so he's got to go fight him. Well, in the beginning, Harold beats up those young ones because they don't know any tricks. He knows them all, but the bottom line is, the more those young ones fight, the more they figure those old guys out, and pretty soon they're beating them up. And now, pretty soon, Harold's getting beat up all the time. And Hilda looks over and said, really? You can't handle these 2-year-olds, whatever, those 3-year-olds? And so his ego can't handle it. So now it's getting later in the season. Now we're in past February. It starts about Valentine's Day, February 12th, 14th, whatever it is. But come March, now they're getting ready to go to the nest site anyway, and Harold and all these old ones are getting beat up on a regular basis, because those young ones want what they don't have, and he is just trying to protect his turf. And so now, if he's the dominant one, the alpha in that pair, oftentimes he will say, Hilda, I think it's about time we go look to our nest site and get it before somebody gets it. And if he's dominant, she says, okay, Harold, and they go. His ego can't handle getting beat up anymore. But if she's the alpha in there, She says, no, Harold, I think I kind of like it here. We're going to stay for a while. So they stay, and she tells them when they're going to leave and go back to the nest. And we saw that happen out here. So the bottom line says, and you could just almost tell that he was depressed. His ego, he just couldn't handle what was going on anymore to him. He just wanted to get out of here so bad. So, but often they can't go out until the snow leaves. And the snow is their cue to go sit in the fields in a staging area, if you will, prior to going to their nest site. And when the lakes and ponds open up about a foot around the outside, then they go there, claim a site, and they can do that at any time, but they will not start laying till the water's open all the way around. Otherwise, the predators would just jump that foot, run out there, grab mama and the eggs and off the thing, and not going to work. So the way it's their system's put together, you don't go till the water's automatically open or all the way open. Nobody's going to swim out there because male can handle them if they have to swim in the water. So that's kind of what it was. So the success of this thing was based upon no migration. All those birds came back here every year, and they brought their cygnets here. Everything that those young ones learn, they learn the first year. They learn right here. And they do the swans do a lot of stuff for show. They're showing off, and they're a very vain bird. They know they're pretty, but they're teaching the young ones, and the young ones emulate. You can see them. They emulate whatever their dad does or mom does. They do those kinds of things. If their dad's aggressive, you see they're aggressive. They're picking on white birds. You know what I'm saying? Just because they can, because they have a license, because their dad does that. So, and if they're passive, they're passive. So, but everything they learn, they have to learn here, because if they come here, the parents are going to dump them. Because they're not going back to the nest site saying, come on kids, we're going to go back and we're going to have another, and you're going to be uncle and aunts, and that's not going to happen. So they dump them. So now the young ones, they start getting beat up by by older birds, and so they're saying, what's wrong with the old man? Is he crazy or what? But he's just trying to make you leave, and kick our 18-year-olds out of the house and say, hey, go on, because we're going back and we're going to start this thing over again. So that's kind of what happens, and so they leave and they go back to the nest site. Now the bottom line says no migration. Said we knew that if they went down to Arkansas, Oklahoma, wherever, they fly into buildings, they fly into water towers and high lines and all this kind of stuff, you'd lose 40 to 50% of the birds that you sent down wouldn't be able to come back. You're losing ground on that. So the numbers were able to compound and get big, because when you don't migrate, we had 1 to 2% attrition. So the numbers just go boom, 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 boom. They kept going. That's how at the end of 25 years there was that 8,000 birds. For 3 or 4 years prior to Sheila passing, the DNR knew that they wanted, we had to find a way to get the swans to migrate. And so they tried putting John boats out here with scarecrows in there and scared them away. And after 2 or 3 days, they jumped up in the boat and said, look at the big time rock that I'm sitting on, isn't this great? And so that wasn't bothering them at all. So that didn't work that year. So the following year they tried somebody else. They tried hazing him, tried to scare him away, and it wasn't working. And so it was, they didn't know for sure what they wanted to do. So finally they knew they didn't want to do it. But Carol said, Sheila, you can't feed this year. And maybe if you don't feed, they'll leave. So now the people who come to see the swans, Sheila wasn't going out and feeding. And the birds kept, you could tell that they were stressed. They wanted to know where Sheila was. And the young ones were saying, what are we here for? There's nothing really going on. Don't worry, she'll be coming out. She always does. Well, she didn't come out. Well, they said that Sheila couldn't feed until the 1st of January. Well, now it's a week before Christmas. Just about prior to Christmas week, probably the 20th or so. And now the people are noticing that these swans are not liking this whole thing at all. There's a whole month and nobody's feeding them. And now they can eat the weeds, but the ones that like the corn, they wanted somebody to be coming out here. So the people started talking. Now these people don't know a swan. They don't know anything about them. And so if they can sense it, then the word started getting back. The DNR are trying to starve the swans in Monticello. And that got back to DNR. And they said the last thing that Carol wanted to be known, we're starving the trumpeter swans in Monticello. So one day I came home and Sheila said, Carol called today and said they're going to have a meeting on Monday and determined maybe they could let us start feeding a little earlier. And she says, what do I do? I said, order corn from Howard Lake. She says, what do you mean? What if they have a meeting and says no? I said, they already had the meeting. They're just trying to save face, And so it's just like big business, that's just the way they operate. So she says, well, okay, it's on you if I'm sitting on corn and I can't feed. I said, yeah, don't worry about it. Just order the corn. So she ordered the corn. So we had it sitting there. And I said, what time was our meeting supposed to be? She says, 9 o'clock. I said, I'll call you by 9:30. It's going to be a short meeting. They called it 20 after 9. And said, Sheila, we've decided you could probably start feeding a little early. She started feeding that day. She fed a ton of corn a day. She kept feeding them until they left in March. And so the bottom line says that didn't work. But the bottom line says they had to try things. They still had to get these things to migrate somehow. They couldn't make it happen. Sheila passed, and so that in 11 and then 12, I got no snow. I should have had 3,000 swans. I had 600 birds. They were field feeding someplace. I started getting calls from 5 state areas. Said, am I supposed to have trumpeter swans here? And I said, have you got no snow, cornfields, wheat fields? We didn't have corn. We had wheat in North Dakota, or vegetation, because they eat vegetation. And they said, yes, we do. I said, this year you're supposed to have. I just knew in my heart as a farmer, they're just field feeding. They just didn't bother coming. They said, hey, the same stuff Sheila feeds. So, bottom line says, that did not give them migratory DNA. What it gave them was a long leash, because they knew where Sheila's was. Their GPS, they could still go back to Sheila's if they wanted to. But the magic of the whole thing was, every bird that went someplace that year, every egg that they laid, those babies, none of them knew where Sheila's was. They just knew from where they were from that point. They'd never been to Sheila's. So the bottom line says, from that point on, I had fewer birds. I had more than 600, but I had, not a lot of birds. Didn't have 2,700. Wasn't even getting close, because they were all going someplace else, and they were going to various other states. And that was the intent in the first place. We now have migratory DNA, because every egg that was hatched now don't know where it is, and when they breed, they're going to go wherever, and their babies don't know. So now the Sheila's Diner is no longer in the equation, right? So bottom line says it worked, and we got it done. So no problem me feeding. I enjoy it, and I enjoy talking to people about Sheila's swans and the legacy. But now Carol Henderson, he just retired, and he gave me a call, and we talked and stuff, and congratulate him on pulling the pin. And I said, what's this scoop on the swans now? I said, I haven't heard anything for a long time. He says, what you got for birds? I said, well, this year I had, it was a crazy winter. So, but I said I ended up with knowing that I had 2,500 to 2,700 swans here, and conservatively, I might have had 3,000 swans at one time. And I said, so what's your word on what's going on with them? Carol says we have about 17 to 18,000 in Minnesota that they know, and they can take pictures. They know where they all are anyway. And he said, but the good thing, he says, there are 45 to 50,000 in what I call the big egg. That all the way over to Tennessee, Michigan, over to Oregon, and down into Oklahoma, and all this, and into Canada. I call it the big egg, the big oval. And he says 45 to 50,000 in the magic word, and they're doubling every 5 years. Now, the restoration is complete. It took the no migration to get the numbers up, so you had zero attrition almost, and then once you had that, any attrition that was going to be there, it could handle it, and they were making more than they could lose. And the bottom line says, so when we say double every 5 years, 45 to 50,000, they're pretty soon. In 4 or 5 years, there's 100,000 swans someplace in the United States. And all the places that they're going, they're not moving in some place where somebody's going to build. They're in swamps and marshes and whatever. And the people who see them, they kind of like to have them there. It's kind of, hey, I got swans in my place, whatever. So it's a good thing. They're not like they're stomping in somebody's backyard or anything. So the restoration is complete. And so my job at this point, feeding, I love feeding. It's not a problem, because it gives me an opportunity to talk to people about Sheila Swans and what she did. It was all about Sheila, and we owe her a bunch for doing what she did, and she would never quit it for nothing. And but it was and me feeding. Hey, it's just the right thing to do, and it allows me to make people aware of her legacy, and so it continues on and on and on. The more people I can talk to, the more people are going to know, and the better that's going to be for the swan situation.